consequences are going to be. A lot of what I talk about, now my adult presentation is usually about 70 minutes long. I've got 10 minutes today, so we're going to go by pretty quickly. But almost everything I talk about, you can find on my website, awiredfamily.org. I tweet every day at awiredfamily, and on Facebook, I am facebook.com/awiredfamily. And there's also a lot of information. I have nothing to do, but commonsensemedia.org is a really good website if you're interested not just about social media, but just media in general. Some of the articles we do, one of the ones I ask you to pay particular attention to is virtual reality and porn. If you're not paying attention to virtual reality, you're not doing your job as a parent, because virtual reality and porn is going to be a huge issue over the next 3 or 4 years. Pornography is a huge issue because it's readily available. Virtual pornography is going to change the way humans interact with one another. It has a lot to do with future relationships between men and women and so on and so forth and that. So in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with virtual reality, but you've got to be able to bring in the reins and be able to manage what your children are doing with the technology. I know a lot of parents feel overwhelmed, and I'm not going to go through everything that I go through in my presentation. Let me give you 3 tips that every parent has to do in order to be able to manage technology properly. Number 1, you have to talk. You've got to talk to your kids. Find out why they want this technology, why do they want this particular app, what are the kids in their school doing, why are they doing it, right? And then together create a strategy of what you're going to allow your kid to do and what they're not going to be able to do. Secondly, you've got to be able to control where they use the technology in the house. I call that a tech-free zone. 50% of homes in greater Cincinnati do not have tech-free zones, right? Kids have totally unfettered access. They can use the device anywhere that they want, at any time that they want. Understand, over 90% of inappropriate conversations and videos and photographs take place in your home, in the bedroom, and in the bathroom, right? Talk to any police officer, prosecutor. They'll tell you where those photographs were taken, and it was right in your home, right? You also have to set time limits on when the kids can be online, what apps they can be using, and so on and so forth. And one of the most important things, they're all important, but one of the most important things is, depending on the maturity level of your child, you got to be able to be the only person who manages the password on the App Store, whether it's Google Play or whether it's the iTunes Store. In other words, they cannot download any app unless you download it. You're the one who downloads it, right? Now, most parents don't do that, and I'm telling you what, there's a really good chance, particularly by the 6th grade, that there are apps on your child's phone that you have no idea exist. There are photographs on that phone you have no idea that exist. There are videos on that phone you have no idea that exist. They're in Vault or Ghost apps. Generally, they look like calculators. And you might say, well, is that really that big of a problem? I was at a school last week, and there were over 200,000 inappropriate pictures of people in the school district on one man's phone, one young man's phone. And in the same school district, 116,000. Where were they hidden? In Vault apps and in Ghost apps, right? So if you control what apps can be on that device, you're winning the war, or you have a good chance of winning the war. So I have an article, it's called Simon Says Take 10 Steps Forward, and I go and I share an awful lot of information about how you can manage and monitor what your child is doing. Understand that statistically, 49% of teens really do want to have some parameters. They want some guidance, right? They would change their behavior if they knew mom and dad were watching them. The reality is, and after talking to 300,000 kids, most parents don't manage and monitor what their kids are doing. There was an article not too long ago in Time magazine, right? About teen depression and anxiety. The teens are not all right. And the reality is that this generation is very unusual. They've never known a time when the country wasn't at war. Many of them have suffered through the Great Recession of 2008. There's an awful lot of drug abuse, awful lot of alcohol abuse, right? Broken marriages. This is a strange time to be 12 years old or 13 years old. You add on top of that social media, right? And this city, we are in the epicenter of teen depression, right? We have more beds at Children's Hospital for psychiatric purposes than I think than in any children's hospital in the country, and they're always full, right? And we also have the second highest poverty rate, I believe, in this country. So that's a really bad combination when kids are using social media. There's drug abuse, alcohol abuse, poverty, right? Not a good mix. Now this is something, if there's nothing you take back with you, pay attention to this, right? We really only have had a few years to really understand what happens with technology, right? Of Google and just the adoption rate of mobile computing, right? Children's Hospital, 70% increase in childhood depression and anxiety between 2011 and 2015. Yet as adults, we give these devices an unfettered access to our children, right? Another thing that has happened is, and I was telling these kids today, again, I'm not saying social media and technology is bad, right? I've made a living out of it. But what I am saying is that kids are certainly addicted to this technology. Parents are as well, right? 60% of American teens think their parents use technology too much. And as a result, they're not paying as much attention to the children, right? These are the kids saying this. So what do you have? You've got a generation who is addicted to technology, the kids. You've got the other generation, which is addicted to technology, mom and dad. So when they come home, they're not talking to one another, right? They're talking to everybody outside their circle of love, so to speak, right? Other than the people that supposedly care about them and want the best for them, right? There's a commercial on TV today where this guy's driving his car, mom's got headphones on, she's looking at, and she's Facebooking, the kids have headphones on, they're doing whatever they're doing, they're looking at the phone, and dad's talking and nobody can hear the heck, well, what are you saying, right? And it was meant to be funny, but to a certain extent, it's not so funny, right? You go out to eat, everybody's on their phone, they're not talking to one another. You go to soccer games, basketball games, baseball games. I do a lot because I have 5 grandkids. I'm always doing that. What are the parents doing many times? You know, they're looking at their phones as opposed to necessarily looking at the game. And again, I'm not vilifying parents because this has happened kind of slowly and we don't realize we've become addicted to it and the impact it's having on children. This is a study that was done, and it's a sad study, that 13.6% of boys over the age of 12 are depressed, but it's over 36% of girls are depressed after age 12. And what happens is it goes up and up and up and up, and then as girls get older, their depression rate goes down. As boys get older, their depression rate goes up. So they kind of crisscross about 18, 19 years old, right? Girls in particular get their self-esteem oftentimes through social media. How many likes they get on Instagram, right? And then we give it to kids. Now, if your kid, right, weighed 300 pounds, right, and you know how to stop that kid from weighing 300 pounds, you change the way they eat, right? But we're not changing the digital diet of our children. We're not managing and monitoring them many times because, you know what, it's kind of easier if your kid's not yelling and screaming, right, to just let them have the digital device, particularly when you're going on a vacation. I told these kids today that, you know, I've had an iPhone for 7 years, and Apple, even when I'm not using an app, they know everything about me. They know what time I get up in the morning, they know what time I go to bed at night, they know every place that I've been for the last 7.5 years, right? That's without using an app. You add an app to that and look at all the different things that Apple and all the associated apps, which are all part of brokerage groups, right? There's digital brokerage group where they're data brokers basically, with these massive data lakes. And we're like the hub for data analytics here in Cincinnati because of Kroger and others. But look at all the information that they garner about me. Well, that's fine, I'm an old guy. I don't care what they know about me, and I'm very careful what I do. But your children aren't necessarily careful. They're getting a digital profile which will follow them for the rest of their life. And incidentally, I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I'm really not. What I am saying is you don't know who has access to your child's information, right? You don't know, and we have to be a little bit more careful. And what do they do with this information? Well, it ends up going into basically a digital file folder. And as I tell kids, you know, it's captured, stored, analyzed, and sold. I mean, that's why apps are free. you make a deal with Instagram or Snapchat and what have you that please let me use this app for free, and I'll give you my private personal information, and then you can sell it. Now I'm simplifying it, right? It's written in legalese, which is difficult to understand, but that's the reality of the situation. So, and again, I want to be cognizant of your time here and that, but most of us would not necessarily associate with these being the top apps. YouTube and Netflix are actually used more than Snapchat and Instagram, right? And what most people don't understand about YouTube, right? YouTube is a great, I'll even call it a social media app, right? But it's like New York City. New York City, I don't know about you guys, New York City is probably the best city I've ever been in. It's got the best of everything, but it also has the worst of everything. And you would never let your 12, 13-year-old daughter run around in New York City in Times Square, right? At 10, 11 o'clock at night. But with YouTube, we don't care sometimes if our kids are on YouTube at 10 o'clock at night, right? And so who influences your kids? These people influence your kids. If you are in middle school, you probably know these people more than you would know any Hollywood star, right? And these people also, in many times, make more than Hollywood stars. And most adults have never heard of them, yet they're influencing our kids, right? Now, I'm not saying they're all bad, because they're not, but some of them are, right? And yet, almost every parent I talk to thinks that, I will not let my kid use Snapchat, I will not let my kid use Instagram, but for school, we let them use YouTube. Really? Well, I hope you've set up the filters on YouTube, because you can learn everything, including how to kill yourself, right? And then I mentioned pornography, virtual pornography. These are all things which are really kind of changing the dynamics of relationships, right? The pornography, the biggest pornography today, if you are a 12, 13-year-old boy, is not pornography that you can download. It's pornography you can get from girls in the school. Now imagine the one young man in a county over in northern Kentucky. He's in jail right now. He had over 500 pictures of girls in his school district on his phone. And he was very clever about how he went about getting them. What I told the kids today also, how do kids get around this whole issue of sharing photographs? Well, in the case of a girl or a boy, they'll show pictures of their private parts without their head, right? But what I showed them today, and I can't show you today, we don't have enough time, is that you can have a picture that doesn't have a face in it and still identify who it is, right? Because a smartphone and the associated technology and the infrastructure doesn't look at a picture as a picture, it looks at it as mathematics. And when you run it through recognition software, it goes out and it looks for a mathematical match. It doesn't know if it's a dog, a cat, or a naked person. It knows it's math. And it takes that math and finds it. And I actually showed them a picture, couldn't tell who the girl was, that I found when I did a search on Google for Kik users. And you could just see a profile of a girl. I just used a digital snipping tool and cut it out, ran it through a reverse image search, just a simple one on Google. And it told me exactly who it was, her phone number, and her address, and her Instagram name, right? And her Twitter name as well. Now, is everybody going to do that to your child? No, they're not. But kids have to know that there are consequences for their actions, and they're not really as clever as they think they are. So I'm not going to go through all this because we don't have enough time, but I want to go to the tail end here. This is important. I'll end it here. You all might remember there was a 3G, right, as opposed to 4G. So if you've got a phone today, like through Verizon, this functions on a 4G network. Before that was 3G, and what's going to be down the pike is 5G, right? So 3G was coming into its own probably 2004, 2005, and around that same time as 3G was growing, more and more people were getting smartphone technology by 2007, 2008, and what we recognize or people in the medical community recognize is more and more kids under the age of 5 were being rushed to the emergency room. And nobody could understand why is it, because it wasn't like there were more kids, but more and more kids were being rushed to the emergency room. This guy did a study, and he followed the growth pattern of 3G at the time, which was the fastest network, over a couple of year period. And look what he finds. This is the growth of 3G